They all thought I was just another retired librarian enjoying quiet mornings with tea and crossword puzzles. My son Daniel never took my advice seriously, brushing off years of guidance as old-fashioned. But everything changed the day I discovered $6 million tucked away in forgotten stock certificates, assets I had completely forgotten about. It started with a routine cleanup of my attic. Between dusty boxes of books and old photo albums, I found a bundle of paperwork labeled Harper Family Investments. Curiosity turned to disbelief as I realized these certificates had quietly grown to a staggering $6 million over decades. Money I never touched, never bragged about, and never expected. When Daniel found out, everything shifted. Suddenly, the same son who had shrugged off my suggestions for years now called constantly, "Mom, maybe you should invest that, wisely." Friends who hadn't spoken to me in months showed up with friendly advice. Even distant relatives I barely knew started offering their opinions. The warmth I had once taken for granted now felt like scrutiny, a subtle test to see how I'd handle this unexpected fortune. But I wasn't naive. I had learned long ago that money changes people, and not always for the better. While everyone else saw dollar signs, I saw opportunity. The chance to teach my son a lesson, protect my independence, and finally claim the respect I had earned over a lifetime. If you're watching this, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Let me take you back to how a forgotten investment became a $6 million revelation, and how it revealed more about family, trust, and hidden strength than I ever expected. I had always lived a quiet, disciplined life. As a librarian in a small town in Ohio, I spent my days organizing knowledge, guiding young readers, and quietly managing my household finances. People often underestimated me, assuming that a woman with soft-spoken manners and a love for books couldn't possibly handle large sums of money or make calculated decisions. They were wrong. I had learned to be patient, observant, and strategic, qualities that now seemed invisible to everyone around me. My son Daniel was bright, but impulsive. From the moment he left college, he had his head set on fast money, big risks, and instant gratification. I tried to teach him the value of patience, diversification, and long-term planning, but he brushed off my advice, believing he already knew better. Over the years, he made small investments, gambled with startup ventures, and dismissed my conservative strategies as boring. While he chased the thrill of rapid gain, I quietly built a foundation for the future, penny by penny, stock by stock. Life wasn't always easy. My husband, Richard, had passed when Daniel was just 16, leaving me to manage the household alone. I took it in stride, never complaining, and made sure Daniel felt loved and supported. I continued to work diligently at the library, saving every extra dollar, learning about investments, and occasionally seeking counsel from old acquaintances in finance. Little did I know that those forgotten stock certificates, tucked away in a dusty filing cabinet, would one day turn into my most valuable asset. As Daniel grew older, his successes and failures became more pronounced. He bought and sold businesses with varying results, sometimes coming to me for help, sometimes arrogantly refusing it. Friends and neighbors often commented on how I had raised a boy who thought he knew everything, never realizing that I had always given him the foundation to succeed, but he had refused to follow it. Despite the challenges, my life had its quiet joys. Sunday mornings with a good book, community events at the library, and the satisfaction of knowing I had created a life of stability for my son, even if he didn't always appreciate it. That stability was what allowed me to discover the forgotten stock certificates without panic or uncertainty. I understood the value of patience, compound interest, and long-term thinking in a way Daniel never could appreciate fully. When I stumbled upon the certificates, it felt like the culmination of a lifetime of careful planning and quiet diligence. This wasn't luck, it was strategy, foresight, and decades of disciplined choices. And yet, I knew this revelation wouldn't just affect my life. It would shake the foundation of my relationship with Daniel and the people around me, revealing their true intentions and testing my patience and judgment in ways I had never imagined. It all began on a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind of day when nothing seems extraordinary. I was sorting through some old files in my home office when I noticed a thick envelope I had completely forgotten about. Curious, I opened it and discovered a set of stock certificates my late husband had purchased decades ago, neatly organized but long neglected. As I examined them, I realized they weren't just any stocks. They represented a portfolio worth $6 million in today's market. My heart raced. $6 million, a fortune I hadn't even known existed. The sense of empowerment was immediate, but it was also disorienting. How had I never stumbled upon this earlier? Why had my husband kept it so hidden? And most importantly, how would I navigate the sudden shift in my life that these certificates would bring? The news, of course, couldn't stay a secret for long. When I casually mentioned it to Daniel, my son, over breakfast, his reaction was everything I expected. Disbelief followed by barely concealed greed. $6 million? Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner? We could have done something amazing with this, he said, his voice tinged with excitement and frustration. I remained calm, carefully choosing my words. Daniel, this isn't about spending. It's about what's right, and timing matters. You might want to listen before making assumptions. His friends, and even some extended family, soon caught wind of the discovery. Invitations and calls started pouring in, sudden interest from distant relatives, old friends, and neighbors who had barely noticed me before. It was astonishing how quickly the dynamics of relationships shifted once money entered the picture. People who had once treated me with polite indifference suddenly seemed overly attentive, eager to connect or solicit advice, or hoping to benefit in some way. For me, this discovery was a turning point. It wasn't just about the money. It was about testing loyalties, seeing who truly cared, and understanding the fragile nature of trust. I knew that Daniel's reaction was only the beginning. I had to navigate this new reality carefully, balancing family, friends, and the newfound wealth while staying true to myself. The $6 million in those old stock certificates didn't just represent financial security. They became a mirror, reflecting the true character of those around me and setting the stage for decisions that would challenge my patience, test my judgment, and ultimately define the next chapter of my life. The breaking point came unexpectedly one rainy afternoon. Daniel, frustrated by my continued caution, had overstepped again, this time attempting to transfer a portion of the $6 million into a risky investment without my consent. I caught the transaction just in time. The shock of his actions hit me harder than the storm pounding against the windows. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, responsibility, and the boundaries I had to enforce for both our sakes. I realized that protecting the fortune was only part of the solution. I needed a plan that would not only secure the assets, but also rebuild trust and balance within the family. It was a moment of clarity. I could no longer react emotionally to every request or every probing question. I had to take control strategically, establishing rules, clear communication, and accountability. That evening, I called Daniel and Grace into the study. Calm but firm, I explained my intentions. This money isn't a game. It's a legacy, a chance for stability and opportunity, but only if we handle it responsibly. I need you both to understand that. I outlined boundaries, investment strategies, and a shared family plan that included input, but not unilateral decisions. I saw surprise and resistance, yes, but also the first glimmer of understanding. The turning point wasn't just in their reactions. It was in my own mindset. I shifted from being reactive to proactive, from anxious to empowered. I began creating a structured approach to manage the $6 million, segregating funds for long-term security, earmarking a portion for personal growth and philanthropy, and carefully planning investments that aligned with both my values and the family's future. By the next week, I had implemented a system that balanced authority with collaboration. Daniel and Grace could participate, but the final decisions rested with me. Slowly, the tension began to ease. Conversations became more productive, less charged with expectation. I could feel the foundation of our family beginning to stabilize. This moment marked the pivot from uncertainty to strategy, from fear to confidence. I had discovered that wealth was not merely about money. It was about leadership, foresight, and the courage to protect what mattered most. The $6 million was no longer just a financial windfall. It had become a catalyst for personal growth, family reconciliation, and a renewed sense of purpose. The real test came 3 months after I had established our family plan. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the sun barely peeked through the clouds. Daniel, still struggling with the idea of boundaries, had been pushing for an unapproved investment in a startup that promised high returns but carried enormous risk. I had refused, citing our agreed-upon strategy and emphasizing caution. But the tension was palpable. I could feel the simmering frustration in the room. Then it happened. An unexpected call arrived from the broker representing the startup. They offered an opportunity so enticing it could triple our returns within a year. Daniel's eyes lit up, and for a moment, I almost faltered. The numbers were impressive, the pitch persuasive. My first instinct was panic. This could undo months of careful planning, but I forced myself to pause. I took a deep breath. reminding myself that the $6 million was a tool for stability, not a playground for impulsive decisions. I asked Daniel and Grace to step aside for a moment. Alone, I reviewed every document, ran the projections, and analyzed the hidden risks that the broker glossed over. The more I dug, the clearer it became. The opportunity was a trap masked as a golden ticket. One misstep could jeopardize a significant portion of the inheritance. I felt the weight of responsibility pressed down harder than ever. This wasn't just about money. It was about safeguarding our family's future, maintaining trust, and proving that careful planning mattered. Returning to the living room, I explained my findings in calm, unwavering detail. This isn't just a high-risk investment, I said. It's a gamble disguised as opportunity. If we take this step, we could lose millions, far more than you realize. Our strategy isn't about chasing quick wins. It's about building sustainable security and growth. That means patience, discipline, and sticking to the plan. Daniel's face reddened. He wanted excitement, instant gratification, the thrill of big numbers. But I stood firm. I reminded him of our rules. No unilateral decisions, no impulsive moves, no ignoring the framework we had agreed upon. Grace nodded quietly, and I could sense the shift. Finally, a shared understanding of why structure mattered more than temptation. The following days became a test of resolve. The broker called repeatedly, offering new incentives, pressing deadlines, and emotional appeals. Every time, I held the line, consulting our plan, reviewing numbers, and keeping Daniel and Grace aligned. Slowly, they began to see the wisdom in restraint. The tension didn't vanish immediately, but trust began to rebuild as the family recognized that discipline and strategy could outperform impulsive ambition. The true climax arrived when the broker attempted one last maneuver, pressuring Daniel to sign documents while I was out. Daniel hesitated, looked at the papers, then at me, and finally said, "No, Mom, we stick to the plan." Relief washed over me like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. This was the moment our hard work paid off. Daniel understood the value of patience. Grace respected the structure, and I realized my leadership had truly anchored the family's future. By the end of the week, the inheritance was secure, the family aligned, and the lessons had sunk in. The $6 million had been more than a financial windfall. It had been a crucible, testing patience, wisdom, and integrity. I had confronted temptation, navigated conflict, and emerged stronger as a mother, guardian, and strategist. That Saturday, I understood a fundamental truth. Real wealth isn't measured in numbers alone. It's measured in the discipline, foresight, and trust that preserve it for generations to come. The aftermath of the climax was quieter than I expected, but no less significant. Daniel, who had previously bristled at my rules, began showing signs of genuine respect for the strategy we had put in place. He stopped pushing for impulsive decisions and even started asking thoughtful questions about long-term planning. Grace, who had been skeptical at first, became an active partner in managing the inheritance, learning to evaluate risks and make informed choices alongside me. The house, once filled with tension over money, gradually returned to a sense of balance. Family dinners no longer revolved around disputes over investments or secretive deals. Laughter returned to the living room, subtle at first, then more freely, as trust slowly rebuilt itself. I realized that the fortune had been a double-edged sword. It had tested relationships and revealed weaknesses, but it had also created an opportunity to strengthen bonds. I also reflected on my own growth. The $6 million had given me more than financial freedom. It had demanded patience, decisiveness, and emotional intelligence. I had learned how to navigate family dynamics, enforce boundaries without alienating loved ones, and guide others toward responsible decisions. My confidence had deepened, not just as a custodian of wealth, but as a matriarch who could protect and teach. Outside our family, life felt lighter. I no longer feared that every request or casual conversation was motivated by greed. The inheritance, once a source of anxiety, had become a tool for connection and education. I found joy in sharing lessons with friends, distant relatives, and even acquaintances who admired the careful balance we had achieved. Most importantly, I saw Daniel transform. He began to understand that wealth was not simply an end in itself, but a responsibility to nurture, preserve, and use wisely. Grace's participation reinforced that the family could function as a team, guided by principles rather than impulse. By the end of the fallout, the $6 million had proven to be more than just money. It had been a test, a mirror, and ultimately a bridge. It revealed the character of those around me and strengthened the bonds I had thought fragile. I knew then that the true victory wasn't in the numbers or the security they brought, but in the resilience, trust, and understanding that had emerged stronger than ever. With the dust settled, our lives felt remarkably transformed. The $6 million from the old stock certificates had done more than alter our financial standing. It had reshaped our family. Daniel no longer viewed me with skepticism or resentment. He sought guidance and valued my insight. Grace, who had initially doubted her own abilities, now contributed confidently, proving that maturity and understanding could grow even under pressure. I had learned that wealth was never just about numbers. It was about relationships, trust, and the lessons we passed on. My role had shifted from a cautious guardian of my own security to a mentor, helping my family navigate challenges and make thoughtful decisions. The house, once heavy with tension, now radiated warmth and collaboration. Conversations revolved around planning, aspirations, and shared experiences instead of secretive arguments or hidden agendas. The inheritance, while a catalyst for conflict, had ultimately strengthened our family bond. Daniel and Grace learned the value of patience, strategy, and foresight, lessons that extended far beyond finances. I had also discovered a renewed sense of purpose. I realized that teaching others, guiding them through complexity and balancing authority with compassion was a form of empowerment that no money could replace. Even outside the family circle, I noticed a shift in perspective. Friends, neighbors, and acquaintances saw the changes, not in the size of our wealth, but in the harmony and confidence that now defined our household. The experience had instilled in me a deeper understanding of human nature, the fragility of trust, the dangers of assumption, and the strength that comes from resilience and honesty. By the time summer arrived, our lives had settled into a steady rhythm. The $6 million was no longer just a sum in a bank account. It had become a symbol of lessons learned, boundaries respected, and relationships healed. Daniel and Grace continued to grow into their roles as responsible stewards of both family and fortune, and I felt a profound satisfaction in knowing I had guided them wisely. As I looked around during one quiet evening, the house filled with laughter, conversation, and shared purpose, I understood something fundamental. The real value of wealth is not in its possession, but in the way it shapes character, nurtures trust, and creates opportunities for growth. That $6 million was a turning point, yes, but the true inheritance was the wisdom, resilience, and unity that would endure for generations.